The world of boxing is one that is full of history. At one point in time, it was the most dramatic and hyped of sports. But now, it's become a shell of its former self in certain ways, to the extent that recent events have made people wonder what the true fate of boxing is. Part of the reason for this question is Jake and Logan Paul. This is a set of brothers who have made waves in boxing over the last month, and many are thinking that this could be a turning point for boxing, or be the end of it. Allow us to show you why the Paul brothers are taking over the boxing world. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Number 6. The Brothers Paul. Before we dive into the world of boxing, we need to dive into the online world first to discuss Logan and Jake Paul. Because long before they were boxers, these two guys were YouTube stars. They were guys who did all sorts of videos during the boom of the YouTube era. Jake would do music videos and prank videos, and Logan would do the same thing and go even more extreme at times. As such, both got a massive rush of fame. Jake Paul was picked up by Disney for a time, and Logan Paul was so famous that he got his own series called Logan Paul vs. The problem, though, for these two guys was that while their fame was undeniable in certain respects, their controversial natures were just as pronounced. Logan Paul made videos mocking suicide while in Japan. Jake Paul was a notorious partier and a guy who was never afraid to get so loud that it annoyed his neighbors to no end. The controversies eventually continued to the point where Jake got fired from Disney. A lot of people started to ignore Logan Paul for his stunts, and the brothers just returned to YouTube and maintained their fame via their loyal fan bases. And believe it or not, it worked. They're still making millions on YouTube. And in fact, Jake is now saying that he didn't get fired from Disney and that he left amicably from them. And he was fine with it because of the money he was making via his YouTube posts. So, as you can see, these brothers are a handful and not in a good way. But now, they're getting their attention because of the boxing world they're in. Number 5. Jake Paul's impact. Last month, there was a major boxing event that went on. It was the return of Iron Mike Tyson, and it was set up to go against an old rival of his in Roy Jones Jr. The spectacle was so much that even the Boxing Commission noted that this wasn't an official event in regards to the main event, and thus no winner would be declared. But the event went on anyways. But a key difference between this and other boxing events is that the undercard was just as worthy because it featured Jake Paul in his second boxing match ever, going up against former NBA star Nate Robinson. The match was started because of the internet, obviously, and it became something that would be talked about for weeks on end. Not the least of which was because Jake Paul knocked Nate Robinson out in such a way that it became a meme that everyone had to react to. Naturally, Jake had a lot to say on the matter. Quote, "I have been training my ass off for the past year. I am taking this seriously," Paul said. "There is a long list of opponents I want, like Conor McGregor and fellow MMA fighter Dylan Dennis. I want to knock both of them out. I want to be in this sport for a long time. I'm in love with this, so why not?" He went on, "For me, my whole life has been a fight, so fighting is something I'm great at," Paul said. "Being from Ohio in a small town and just fighting for success, people hating on me, I'm one of the most hated people in the world. It's not easy," close quote. Indeed, it is not. But he's making the most of it, to the extent that there was serious talks between him and the McGregor camp to do an exhibition boxing match. According to UFC president Dana White, it won't happen. But weirder things have occurred in the boxing world. Just ask Jake's brother if you don't believe us. Number 4. Logan vs. Floyd. After Jake's big knockout of a notable athlete in Nate Robinson, a lot of rumors swirled about who was going to be next on the list. But what no one expected was another fight featuring another Paul brother to happen. And then it was revealed to be true. In February 2021, Logan Paul, in his second boxing match ever, will be taking on retired undefeated boxer Floyd "Money" Mayweather. Oh yeah, this is real. And not only are the fans eating it up, they have a lot to say of themselves. Quote, "If Logan Paul actually manages to be the reason that Mayweather's perfect record is ruined, I'm giving everyone who retweets this $10, close quote. Quote, "I'm all for Logan, but I'm low-key kinda nervous. He goes from KSI to Floyd Mayweather. I think he might be jumping the shark a bit, but I'll be there ready to watch if Logan can beat the odds." To 2021, the champ versus the Maverick. Floyd Mayweather coming out of retirement to box Logan Paul feels like Daniel Day-Lewis coming back to star in a movie with the Cash Me Outside girl. He will avenge the NBA community for our fallen soldier, Nate Robinson. Close quotes. If you're curious about that last line, Mayweather made an Instagram post basically saluting Nate Robinson for putting himself out there to try and be a boxer, regardless of the result. This further fueled the fire of conspiracy against Logan being Floyd's opponent because why would he go after the lesser boxer when Jake just beat Nate clean? Either way, this is really happening, and pre-orders for the event are up right now. And if you get it sooner rather than later, you'll actually be saving money. Number 3, what does this mean for boxing though? That's another good question, because the fact that 2 major boxing events are partially or fully focused on the Paul brothers makes you really wonder how desperate boxing is for headlines. Because there are still major boxing matches going on in their own right, including them being shown on Fox, ESPN, and more. And yet, they're not getting the true publicity that events like the UFC are getting, or even these spectacle fights. And ironically, one boxing legend has noticed that: Mike Tyson himself. Listen, my ego says so many things, but my reality is that they help boxing so much. Boxing owes these YouTubers boxers some kind of, respect. They should give them some belts because they make boxing alive. Boxing is pretty much a dying sport. The UFC was kicking our butts. Now we've got these YouTuber boxers and 25 million views. Boxing's going back thanks to YouTube boxers, Tyson said. While this may sound like just another Mike Tyson rant, it's not that simple. Because when Logan versus Floyd was announced, the internet exploded with the news. Because no one could believe Floyd would come out of retirement for this, and yet he did. So perhaps Mike Tyson is right. Perhaps the reason that boxing is coming back is because guys like Logan Paul and Jake Paul are bringing their fans into the mix and trying to make it exciting again. Number 2, the Paul bubble. Of course, the catch with something like this is that the hype bubble, if you will, can only go on for so long, and many wonder if that bubble bursts when Logan fights Floyd. Because, if we're being honest, Floyd should win this in the first round, barring him intentionally going soft on Logan to drag the fight out. Don't forget, Floyd is the master of defensive boxing, so he can make this go as long as he wants. As for Jake, if he was to get a fight against a big-name boxer or MMA fighter and be creamed by them, then will anyone want to see him fight again? We've seen this kind of thing with various sports all over, like undefeated streaks or players who make headlines because they're playing really good. Then they have one bad day, and suddenly no one talks about them again. Could that be what happens to Logan and Jake? We'll find out. Number 1, the boxing world. Regardless of what happens to the Paul brothers, the boxing world is in a bit of a crisis right now. It's nowhere near as popular as it was even a decade or 2 ago. And with these spectacle fights, for lack of a better word, taking over things, are only going to get more complicated for them. Can boxing ever truly recover? It's hard to say, but most purists are going to say no, especially not with the Paul brothers being the faces of the brand. So, what do you think? What do you think of this look at Logan and Jake Paul and how their antics in the boxing ring are suddenly making boxing exciting again in one form or another? Can you believe that they are the new faces of boxing at the moment? Do you think that their bubble will eventually burst and lead to boxing going back into a regression of sorts? Let us know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next time on the channel.